All right. It looks like we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good evening to everyone that is joining us via Zoom. Good evening, everyone that is here in person. Thank you so much for showing up. We are excited. This is our last leadership trajectory series for the semester. And so we are winding down the semester. And so we wanted to end on a high note. So we have a wonderful guest here. I will let him introduce himself and tell him about himself and tell you guys about himself. So without further ado, Benjamin Hagedorn.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for that intro. And let me know if you're not picking up audio online or anything like that. Well, nice to meet everybody. Thanks for coming in. That was a nice welcome, and still waiting on, who's going to actually give this exciting presentation that I've been hearing so much about. But I would love for this, we got a small group, so it's perfect for us just to have a dialogue. So if at any point you have any questions, comments, anything like that, please feel free to just to reach out. So let's just have a conversation. I'll cover a few topics today. I thought it might just be good to introduce myself and give a little bit of my own background and history. And then from there, we'll dive into a few things of, what would I have liked to have known when I was graduating, looking for jobs, and going to some of my first interviews and making huge mistakes. So we'll talk about some of that. And that'll be a relatively quick process. But then from there, we'll spend probably more time on the last section, which is jumpstarting a career, thinking about culture in the workplace, and what role you have to play in that, and what is culture, those types of things, at least from my perspective. So from there, who am I? I graduated in 2008 from UMKC. Before this building was here. This is a beautiful building, and graduated with finance and economics. So you can see that was really great timing in terms of when I was entering the job market. So I can understand that, hey, sometimes things don't work out and you just have to figure it out. That has actually been, I think, my mantra over my career. I married my high school sweetheart, which you can see behind the girl with the safety goggles on. Her name is Katie, and in front of her is Claire. She's our youngest. She's kind of my fellow builder. I like to think of myself as kind of an entrepreneur and a builder, and I think she is that with me, which is a lot of fun. Charles on the right-hand side in the green Minecraft Snuggie loves to read. So that's him reading. And then Calvin, who's in the top left picture, eating peanut butter and jelly and playing board games. So those kind of represent what my kids love to do the most. But how did I get started? So I kind of called myself like a professional stumbler. I've never really known what I wanted to do. I've never really known, I haven't had everything just planned out from the start, right? Because immediately graduating into 2009, lots of things were happening. You just had to kind of figure it out, right? Like I said earlier. So that's always been my case. When I first graduated from UMKC, I got a job at TradeBot. So they're up north, and they're a high frequency trading shop. I worked there for about a year and learned a ton about the market and what adding liquidity was and why there were rebates and all these things I had never really truly understood. And that was a great experience. From there, I moved over to a small tech startup called Infogee here in town. And I was, I think, the third employee, and we grew revenues from 50,000 to 3 million. And that was a great experience. And again, that was one where I saw them playing laser tag in the parking lot one day. And I was like, what are you guys doing? It's like Tuesday. Shouldn't you be working? And they said, well, yeah, no, just taking a break. Like, all right, what do you guys do? And I got really interested and just kind of leapt into it, just took a risk, and that worked out really well. After Infogee, I actually started a self-storage development kind of company called Beyond Self Storage. And over 5 years, we raised a few $100 million and actually sold it to Public Storage for a little over $500 million. actually, which was a fantastic outcome. So that was from there, we took the profits of that and started Warehouse Quote and Where HQ Labs, which is where I work today. So I'm the CEO for those two companies, building the company from scratch over the last 4 years and experiencing a lot of challenges along the way. So, so if I were to summarize, I think my career progress, I would summarize it as stay open. Doors don't open unless you try. So it's okay to take risks, especially the younger you are. Now's the time to do it. And so that's what I have done kind of my whole career, and it's worked out well. So I always encourage people, if you feel passionately about something, to take that risk, because otherwise the door will just remain unopened and you're worse off for it. Okay, so let's continue on here. Thank you. Is this working or not working?
Yeah, it's good.
It is working. Okay. Okay, so again, I'll go through this a little bit more quickly. These are just some of the things as I was thinking about, gosh, what do I wish I kind of had more perspective on coming into the job market. First, let's start with how, you could go to LinkedIn and Indeed and all these locations to find hundreds of job openings. And so how do you even know like which ones you should apply for and which ones matter and why? And how would I even begin to filter through some of those things? Well, first, at least what I would recommend, because I had really no concept of this coming into the job market, is really understanding industry trends. And the only way you can understand industry trends is just by reading a ton. I always recommend the Wall Street Journal. That's an absolutely amazing way of just understanding kind of what's happening in the world and the economy. But I'll give you one example. Industrial real estate versus office real estate. Yes, they're both in real estate. And so you might be leaving college saying like, I want to get into real estate. Well, choose carefully between those two because they're in very different cycles, both short and long-term cycles. So it's interesting to, at least spend some time kind of contemplating that, yes, there are professions like real estate developer or sales or marketing, but there's a lot more deeper context to marketing or accounting. And if we don't get some of the basic questions right, then you will probably find yourself constantly battling uphill, if that makes sense, right? Like Warren Buffett has a quote that sometimes it's just easier to change boats versus constantly patching a leaky boat. And if your leaky boat is the wrong industry, that can really delay potential progress. That can delay the overall experience. That could give you some challenges there versus like I got in the right industry at the right time and it was just an accelerant to my career. I would, oh yeah, go ahead.
Maybe just sort of contrast a little bit. If you've gone into office real estate, what was your life? What was the life like over the last several years versus kind of the trend lines that you were able to do?
Yeah, sure. So the question was like, what if you had gotten into office development instead of industrial development? And the answer to that is that, look, I think we could have worked 3, 4, 5 times as hard and made maybe 10% as much progress as we have actually been able to make. Getting into industrial real estate as we've really been booming in e-commerce and a variety of other things that just demand more and more warehousing space has really been kind of the definition of a rising tide lifting all boats. And now that's been a good environment for the last decade. But now with rising interest rates, there's challenges that, of course, come along with that. Office, on the other hand, has consistently been incredibly expensive and a more difficult investment. And then you throw in the completely unknown scenario of COVID and now working from home and these other impacts. that's a massive challenge in the industry. So, or another example is we had actually gotten into senior living. So we had, all right, yeah, we're industrial real estate developer, but for some reason, we thought it was a good idea. Let's get into senior living and start building those types of facilities. And we completely misjudged how difficult it is to build a facility and manage and operate a facility where people's lives are in your hands versus just, socks and some TVs in a warehouse. And so one of the lessons learned that we had was we're not emotionally built to handle that kind of pressure. We want to go back to handling the stuff that is not someone's life on the lines if you make a mistake, right? That kind of thing. So that's kind of the concept I think here that I was trying to hit on this example of the senior investment. So I hope that answers your question, but ultimately we would have been working much harder and not as well off. Yes. Yeah, multifamily is a great investment. It's one we do and that we do regularly. The difference between what we were building and multifamily is we were building assisted living facilities. So it wasn't that you were just, renting an apartment to someone over the age of 50. We were operating almost a light healthcare facility. And that became significantly more challenging than, listen, here's 300 apartments and you just lease them to people. So that was the big difference. It was that operating component that we completely underestimated. Is that helpful? Perfect. Right. Okay. So point number 2. So 1, I'd recommend having some perspective on industry trends. That can be a heck of a way to get started. Number 2, and this is, I would argue, probably the most important, is really understand the culture of the place you're about to go invest the majority of your time at, right? But I think first, in order to do that, we have to understand what does culture actually mean. Culture is not benefits, right? Culture is not, oh, they've got a good 401k and good healthcare. Culture is the thousands of decisions that we make every single day, right? It's how you treat each other. It's how I treat you and you treat me. It's do we say thank you? Do we say hello in the morning, or do we ignore each other and just go sit at our desk quietly and never talk to anybody? Do we say we're sorry when we make a mistake, or thank you when somebody does something to help us? That's what culture is. It's the thousands of decisions that each of us make every single day. And so how can you begin to understand the culture of a place that you're potentially going to go work at? Well, there's a lot of different ways. You could, look for Best Place to Work awards. Those awards specifically look at culture, employee surveys, feedback, a variety, and they're in categories from extra small companies to extra large companies. So there's a lot of great ways to get that kind of information, but I would say that can make the huge difference. If you show up to work every day and you actually like what you do and you like the people around you, that's so much better than showing up to work every day and sitting in your car as long as possible because you just can't get out of the car and get into the building, right? Whether you're working remote or in person, those are just the way that goes. The other thing is, take some time to really reflect on what's important to you in culture. Are you wanting to be at a place where everybody is really high performers and there's a lot of, I wouldn't say aggression, but there's a lot of, high expectations pushing the envelope of what is expected of you? pushing you into uncomfortable situations because that's the culture of the company. Or, you know, and these don't have to be independent of each other. You can be all of these things. Or are you saying, you know what, like transparency is really important to me. I want to understand the what and the why and the how around where the company is going. And if I'm putting my time and effort into it, I want to know where we're going. And I want to feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. Okay, that's great too. So thinking through what is truly culture? What does culture mean to you? And then there are numerous ways of finding companies that live into that culture. So now the two things we've touched on so far, right? If we get in the right industry that's growing and doing a lot of fun things, you can still be an accountant anywhere. You can still be in marketing anywhere. You can still be in finance anywhere. But if you're in the right industry, moving in the right direction, then that just naturally sets you off on the right path. The other aspect is if you can go somewhere that you're happy, then now you've really set yourself up for success. That's number one. If you hate what you do, it's not worth doing it. So being happy is a really critical component of that. That's what I mean by culture. And then secondly, great, go on offense. I'm somewhat of a more kind of aggressive type person. I would align in that high performer world. Go on offense. Don't just spam your resume into every single open position you can possibly find. Take the time to learn who's evaluating the resume, what's their name, reach out to them, make a personal connection, go on offense. So that's kind of the best recommendation I could give there in terms of actually getting interviews.
Question.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the culture at Warehouse Courts?
I would describe it as kind of the three things that's on the board there. We're wildly transparent. Every month we go through our financials. We talk about what's working, what's not working. We have a deep culture of respect where we have a variety of things we do to purposefully call out the good things that people are doing, recognizing the hard work that they put into the company and a variety of things like that. And then I would say, because we're a small company, we have 50 employees now under Warehouse Quote, another 10 under Labs, but we're a small company and we all face challenges. We all have a lot of high expectations for each other and we hold each other to those high expectations. So I think, the three that I've kind of listed up there were some of the ones that really resonated with me that I think reflect Warehouse Quote and Ware HQ Labs. Yeah, thank you.
So could you maybe describe a culture without naming the name of the firm where you clearly didn't fit, and also how you over time managed working in that environment?
Yeah. So I would say early in my career, I had how do I phrase this? I would say that I never really understood what culture was. I didn't appreciate its importance. Admittedly, I thought culture was just something that was kind of a marketing term, and it was probably just used to try to get me to buy something, and it wasn't real. It didn't really exist. Somewhat of a skeptic. And in one of my early roles, I felt like I was affirmed in that culture wasn't real. This was a place that I think scratched a lot of interesting itches for me in that I learned a lot and got to do really interesting things. But I quickly found out when, 10% of the company would just get fired for no reason. And that created an environment in which everyone was fearful. And so then people would steal each other's ideas because then it was my idea, not this person's idea. So don't fire me, fires this other person. That was not what I wanted. And I that's when I started to understand that, maybe there is something to culture. It's just, this isn't the culture I want. Everybody was wildly high performing, but it wasn't a type of environment that just fit with what I was looking for. So I think that would be, the best example I could give where I started to understand what culture even was at that time. So.
Second question. First job was at Trade Mart.
Yes.
How do you get that? Strength,
No, I think I was spamming my resume at that time. I was doing the thing I am now recommending not to do. And I got an interview and there was I think I probably got lucky. The part of the interview was talking about strategy and different games I played as a kid that like helped teach me strategy. And I was a big Civilization fan, which anybody plays Civilization, that's awesome. But it's a long game where you have to build an entire civilization and fight other civilizations, eventually get to the moon from your first settler. So I was talking about that game. The interviewer also played that game as a child, and we ended up having a connection, and that became the hook to make it to the second round. And one thing led to another, and I eventually got through. So, but it was not what I would recommend. I did not go on offense. Now, on the other hand, Infogee, the second job, that was 100% on offense. I saw them playing laser tag in the parking lot and just went up to them and introduced myself and said, "What are you guys doing? And why aren't you working?" And just started talking to them and having those types of questions. So that was much more driven by me, much more personal, much more relationship based, that kind of thing. So, and they didn't have an open position. I just was talking to them and said, "Hey, I want to help." And they said, "Okay, well, we need a salesman." I said, "Sure, let's do it." And that's how I ended up getting in there. So, all right. So we've processed all the hundreds and thousands of open jobs in Kansas City. We've whittled down the companies and why we want to be at that company. And we have an understanding that I think this is actually a good move for us. So the next question would be, if you could, thank you. I'll just put this down. Okay, interviewing. Man, do your research. This is a lesson learned for me. I'll give you a perfect example. I was working at Merrill Lynch at the time. They ended up getting bought in, but I was an intern there. And to me, Merrill Lynch was like the biggest company in the world, as far as I knew. And I was like, I really need to get some sales experience. This is while I was still in college. Need to get some sales experience. Maybe, so I started applying for different sales jobs, and there was an insurance role at the Hartford where you would sell insurance. Great. I show up at their office, and it was a smaller kind of regional office for the Hartford. Hartford is like a $28 billion company, billion with a B. They're absolutely massive insurance company. And I had told the interviewer that I was excited to work for a more kind of smaller local company, which was absolutely ridiculous. The interviewer called me out on it in the moment. And that was the exact moment where I learned that lesson. I said, holy shit, I really need to do my research before I just start showing up to interviews. So although, it's a little embarrassing to admit that, well, I'd love for you to learn from my mistake before anybody makes the same mistake that I did. So do your research, know who you're meeting with, understand their title, understand their role, understand how that correlates to what you might be doing, and definitely just know the company, which I didn't do. And I, of course, didn't get it, and it was a bad experience. It was a good lesson learned, though, and I never made that same mistake twice. While you're talking to this person, tell stories, give real life examples. People connect to stories, right? You can list out all the facts, and you can be very purposeful with all the reasons why you're the perfect person for this job. If you can tie that back to a story, that feels so much more real and authentic to the interviewer. It gives the interviewer the opportunity to remember you, because again, humans connect to stories much more than they connect to anything else. That's how we've grown up as humans. We've told stories. We are naturally built to understand and connect emotionally to stories. You want to have that connection, similar to how I got the TradeBot job, right? I was telling a story about how I played this video game, and I played the video game, and now we have this connection. Never underestimate the power of that. Being positive, do your best to be positive and energetic. People are attracted to that. They're not attracted to just grumps. And so that might not be easy. That may not be your default state, but I think it's also a reality. People have lots of biases. Let's use some of those biases to our advantage. And then be professional. I'll give you a perfect example. If you were ever to interview with me, one question I will always ask you is, what's your proudest moment? Usually we get beautiful answers that have to do with family and these wonderful, wonderful things where we get to connect as people in the interview process. One person said that, well, his proudest moment was having the highest, like the Guinness World Record for the highest kills with a tactical knife in some like video game, like Modern Warfare or something like that. I was like, why did you just tell me you've killed lots of people with a knife in this video game? That's your proudest moment. So keep it professional. Okay, let's go to the next slide if you don't mind. And again, questions at any point, feel free just to stop me and reach out. So this enters in kind of the last section of the conversation. How are we doing on time? 6. So we've got about 30 minutes. Perfect. All right. So a few things. Again, we'll go through this and then we're going to slow down a little bit. We're going to start to talk about building culture and something that I think is really, really important, not just for how you can show up at work, but how you can even show up in relationships. And it'll get a little complex, but I think it's actually really exciting. So bear with me. So first, all right, you found your job. You've got it through the interview process. Way to go. First thing you should do, man, run at problems. If your default state is just always asking somebody else to help you get through something, like that's going to be a real hindrance. If you can run at problems, that's what I know I'm looking for. I want to hire people that can operate without supervision. If you can identify a problem, run at it, communicate along the way while you solve it, those are amazing skills that it creates this next point, which is that people that run at problems and solve those problems are creating their promotion, right? So either you could wait around and have somebody give you a promotion and give you more money. Guess what? Nobody really wants to just give away more money. Or you can create your next path. You can create value that says, man, thanks for solving this problem. I didn't even realize that this was such an issue, but now you've created so much value. We need to start a team around this. Would you want to maybe start the team, start the division, start this effort? Let's see if we can't grow this. And now you've moved from one position into like the next role, the next step up, all because you were running at problems versus just waiting for somebody to give you the next title or give you the next pay raise. That's kind of more of that go on offense concept. Yeah. No, this is great.
But can you maybe beat that? What the beat fresh out? Who found a way to run at a problem, did it in a way that kind of picked the right problem, picked the right way of approaching it. They didn't rock the boat. They were respectful. What was the?
Yeah. All right. I'll give you one. So we have at Warehouse Quote, we are an operating company that essentially is managed warehouse services. So we have an entire team. Half of our company is day-to-day operations people. And one of our first employees, her name is Megan Payne, started as an account manager. She was previously at Cerner as like a project manager, but she had zero warehousing experience, zero kind of direct customer engagement experience. And from day one, she immediately just started running at problems. And so she would say like, hey, wait a second, we're managing these orders for this customer, but we're missing this data. I'm going to just work with the customer to give us this data. And by doing so, it solves these problems down the line that will then make everybody else's jobs easier. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was perfect. Thank you for doing that. Like, I didn't even know that was a problem. And then, she'd say, all these emails just kind of come into our inbox, but then it gets lost. And heaven forbid if somebody takes any time off or is sick one day or something like that. And she's like, what if we used a ticketing system, something like Zendesk, and maybe all these emails could go into a central repository that everybody could have access to, so then nothing falls on the ground. Oh my gosh, what a great idea. Like, we hadn't thought of that. We were instead just sharing access codes to our email addresses, which is not a very good safety thing to do. I'm looking out for you. And so that kind of stuff just kept happening. And now Megan is part owner in the business. She's a partner and runs half of the operations team. And she's gotten to this point, an owner in the company, because she just constantly ran a problem. She created her own path, and the company's recognized her for it. So that would be one example I could think of. So. Okay, yeah, running into problems. Number 2, have conviction. I think there's just something unsettling about someone who just blows in the wind and just kind of, yeah, whatever you say, sure, whatever, I don't care. There's limited belief that that's the person that's going to go do something big, right? Because they're over here one day and over here another day. Like, have conviction about something, like even if it's in what you believe to be your own purpose as a human, like that's great, but have conviction somewhere. That passion is contagious. And we'll talk about that in 1 or 2 slides, where we start to talk about, like, how do you actually build relationships with people, and how do we build a culture that is meaningful and impactful? Part of it is this passion can be really contagious. And if you can get a group of people excited about making small incremental improvements to the business process, then you can do anything. So, and people do. It's pretty impressive. And then, value relationships. Find a mentor. You don't have to go through this alone. I've had my brother be a mentor. I've had other business leaders be mentors. And every time I have conversations with them, they help me get better. They challenge me to get better. They help me rethink how I look at a problem. And if I was trying to do it all by myself, I would be far less along my journey if I didn't have that person to help me in that process. So experience matters. Don't go alone, and treat people well. Expand the pie. The concept of expanding the pie is, adding Megan into the leadership and ownership of the company technically hurt me, right? But I don't think about it like that. Instead, I think if I add Megan to the pie of, let's say company profits, and she's now more aligned and more invested and more excited about what she's doing, and she helps grow the size of the pie versus just percentages of the pie, there's real value there. And so that's what that expand the pie concept is. Don't go it alone. Value your partners. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, here we go. And I'll go through this one quick. Know your values, know your purpose. It's the same concept as before. Like, what are your core values? I don't know if I'm sure just even thinking about it while you're in your seat, like you can start to think of some concepts, but like, what are the things that are just so deep inside of you? What's the voice when you're alone and you're presented with a hard decision to make? What's the voice that's telling you, like, well, you should probably do this hard thing because it's probably the right thing to do? What is that? And that can be around family. It can be around anything, right? But what is that for you? What is core to who you are? Understanding that is really, really powerful. Aligning yourself with other people that feel a similar way can be very powerful. Treat people well, show respect. It's not about money. The money will come if you do all these things right. The money will happen but building relationships is the hard part sometimes. Okay, so last piece that I wanted to touch on, this is I can't take credit for any of this. I've even cited my source, although not to proper format. But Peter Kaufman, who's the CEO of Glen Eyre, gave a speech to Cal Poly, and I've summarized the speech over the course of 2-3 slides. But you can Google Peter Kaufman, you can Google multidisciplinary approach to thinking. There's a 44-minute speech that he's given to Google, he gave to Cal Poly. It's absolutely amazing. I'd highly recommend it. It's incredibly easy to find. Just Google it. But I wanted to summarize this presentation because I think it's absolutely the easiest way to both mathematically understand culture and how to apply it in 22 seconds. Okay, so he starts off, I think, by setting the stage, which is that, if we don't have multidisciplinary thinking, then we're really missing the whole picture. Well, he says that the frog in the well, this is a Chinese proverb, or a Japanese proverb, the frog in the well knows nothing of the mighty ocean, right? And so what that means is that if our understanding of the world is too small, if what we're open to experience is too small, then we're the frog in the well. We don't have the concept of the mighty ocean, right? So he goes on to think about these multidisciplinary areas to focus on in these 3 buckets. The inorganic world. If you can find something true in physics and geology or anything not living, if you can find something true in that world of thinking, the inorganic world, then that is there's an element of truth to that. Now, if you can also find some truth in the organic world, the world of biology, you, me, cats, dogs, right? Living things, plants, flowers, then now you found another element of truth, right? And then the 3rd bucket is our history, right? Recorded human history. So, tens of thousands of years of recorded human history. So these are the 3 buckets that Peter looked at and started to kind of ask questions to understand, like, what are the universal truths that exist within these 3 buckets? All right, bear with me. I know this, like, what the heck are we talking about? But it's just so good. Let's go to the next slide here. So let's take a moment and think about kind of what is one truth that we found in the inorganic world. It's Newton's 3rd law of motion, right? And without reading ahead too much, the 3rd law of thermodynamics is that every action, there will be an equal and opposite reaction. So if I push down on this table, if I'm pushing down on this table with X amount of force, what is the table doing to me? It's pushing back with X amount of force, just in the opposite direction. Okay, and so Peter calls this mirrored reciprocity. And I'm going to say that a few times, so I better get good at saying. But the idea that, all right, I'm pushing on this thing and it's pushing back, and that's a law of motion. It's a law of the inorganic world. It's math, it's physics, it's science. And you could think about that as mirrored reciprocity. All right, well, let's go to the organic world. So Mark Twain says that a man who picks up a cat by its tail will learn a lesson he can learn in no other way. There's a little bit of a joke for you. So that's absolutely true. And so mirrored reciprocity shows up in the organic world. If you pick up a cat by its tail and start just whipping it around, the cat's going to attack you aggressively, scratch you to all get out, and you're going to get an angry response. Now, on the other hand, if you pick up the cat and you pet it softly and you hold it in the crook of your arm and you speak nicely to it, What does the cat do? It purrs. It gives you back the same response that you're giving to the cat. Mirrored reciprocity, right? The thing you do to the cat is what the cat does back to you, generally. Mirrored reciprocity. So let's go to the third bucket, human experience. So in this case, Peter makes the argument that virtually every interaction you've had with another human is merely mirrored reciprocity in an example. So if you enter an elevator, somebody's on the elevator, and you start yelling at them and hissing and like, oh, why are you going to this floor? It's so far away, right? What's that person going to do back to you? It's like, they're going to like, geez, what's wrong with this guy? Like, he's going to start giving you some ugly looks and whatever else, right? So you're getting back what you presented to that person. Now, on the other hand, if you go into the elevator, you're like, hey, it's a nice smile, just say hi, a brief wave. The other person, 99% of the time, 90% of the time, let's say, I'll give you 10%, 90% of the time, we'll say like, hey, and give you the same thing back, right? And if that happens at 80+%, I'm going to give you 20% now. Even if that happens at 80% of the time, that's another example of mirrored reciprocation, whatever. You get it. So that's, now we've looked at 3 different disciplines. And in each one of those disciplines, we've seen this example of mirrored reciprocity, right? Where if we do something, something equally comes back to us based on what we do. So if we take these concepts and we start to apply them to company culture, or we start to apply them in our own personal relationships, what could that look like? Well, first, Peter recognizes that this all takes time. Relationships take time. You meet someone for the first time, they might be nice, but you don't immediately trust them with, all of your bank codes and everything else, right? Like, you test that person over time to see if they can still be trusted in different situations. This takes time. He goes on and references that Albert Einstein says that the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. And compound interest becomes, he called it the 8th wonder of the world, that becomes incredibly powerful over time. And it becomes even more powerful over even more time. So nothing happens overnight. You don't get promoted overnight. You don't get pay raises overnight. Everything takes time. Everything takes effort. Relationships take time. Relationships take effort. Culture takes time. Culture takes effort. So the next slide here, this applies to how this kind of thinking applies to how we can build relationships as well, right? So remember that mirrored reciprocity kind of fits into this concept. So one of the things he says, I'll jump to the bottom, he says, go positive and go first. What are all the things that you want in the world? What do you want from somebody? What do you want in a mate? What do you want in a job? What do you want? You want respect, and you want to be trusted. You want to connect with somebody who's principled or courageous, competent, loyal, kind, understanding, forgiving, unselfish. If this is what we look for ourselves, what are we doing to get that? Do we approach people in a kind way? Do we approach people in a forgiving way, in an unselfish way? If yes, then more than likely, that's coming back to you in some way. If, on the other hand, you're trying to sneak out some extra margin on some business deal, and the other person finds out, and that destroys the trust that this person had in you, then guess what? Next time that person's not going to be as trusting with you, and it's going to come back to you. So if these are the things that we want other people to feel in us, then we need to also have that feeling with them. And so Peter summarizes all of this concept of, if I put this into the world will pull this back to me. And that's the 22nd course in leadership. That if you want to build a team that trusts each other, then you have to put the trust into the team. If you want to find people that are principled, well, then you need to be principled. If you want loyal, kind, and understanding people in your life, well, then you need to give that to them as well. And if you do that, if you go positive and you go first, if you enter the elevator and don't do anything, well, the other person's not going to do anything either. But if you go into the elevator and you go first and you say hi, then the person says hi in response. So go first, right? And when you go first, go positive, be the list. And so whether you're building a team, meeting strangers, meeting your future spouse, whatever, if you live into this list, if you be the list, that's what's going to come back to you. So be the list is what he says. So go positive and go first. So I know that's an interesting presentation. Like I said, it's 44 minutes. If you watch the whole thing, it's amazingly well done. I'd highly recommend it. But that's the very abridged version of it, that there is this concept that absolutely exists, because when we look across 3 different disciplines, the concept keeps showing up, mirrored reciprocity. So how do we use the concept, this known concept of mirrored reciprocity in our day-to-day life to get the things we want, to build the team we want, to have the outcomes that we want? That's the concept. So go positive and go first, and you will see that coming back to you as well. And I think that's the last slide, other than now questions. Yeah. So that's what I got. So I would love to answer any questions that anybody has, or anything else. We got 10 minutes, which actually surprisingly is like perfectly on time. So happy to answer any questions. Any thoughts? Or if you have something that's not even related to this, happy to talk about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Obviously, you know, it's skills practice. What do you think the number one way to work on these skills for acquisition?
The number one way of working on these skills. So like the list in the business say. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, if you're patient with somebody, like they're going to notice that, because I think we've all experienced somebody who's just not been patient with us. If somebody makes a mistake and you say, hey, it's all right, we got this. Here, like, let me help you. You say thank you and, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Let me correct it, right? If you do those really small things where you show a little bit of kindness to somebody, a little bit of patience, that's what's going to build up the habit to become part of kind of just who you are and how people even start to think about you, like your own personal brand to some extent. What's your name? What's that? Ella? That people start to say like, oh man, I love working on projects with Ella. She's so kind, she's forgiving. Like once she made a mistake and she actually like corrected the whole thing, worked late at night, got it all put back together. The customer didn't even know about it. It was incredible, right? Like, and that becomes part of who you are, and that becomes part of your brand. But it all starts with these like small things that you can do, you don't even have to do it at work. You could do it here in this room. You could do it as soon as you leave. You could do it when you're in the restaurant and a waitress or somebody makes a mistake and you say, hey, that's all right. It happens to everybody. That just a little bit of kindness goes such a long way. So I would just say find really small ways just to practice it. And over time, it starts to become a habit. And then it starts to become like how people will even recognize you in the workforce or anywhere else. Thank you. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I understood your question. The question was, do you ever run into problems that ultimately could be its own revenue source and almost like a completely different company to help solve the problem for you, but also for other people in the market that have the same problem? Is that what you're saying? So I'd say yes, absolutely. So I mentioned that I was CEO for two companies, Warehouse Quote. Warehouse Quote manages warehouses. Where HQ Labs is the second company. Where HQ Labs makes warehouses more efficient, the operations more efficient. Labs was built specifically because of the issues we were having at Quote, right? And so warehousing is still a manual process. There's lots of paper, and that's incredibly inefficient and decreases the ability to scale. So at Warehouse Quote, we said, you know what we should do? We should leverage OCR and maybe some other AI features to actually scan documents, take the data off the document that we need, upload it into our system, start processing orders, and do that more in an automated fashion. Well, that helped solve our problem, but that was the same problem that so many different warehouses still all across this country still have. So we created a whole new company that focuses specifically on that approach. So where Warehouse Quote is a service business, Labs, where HQ Labs is actually a SaaS company, software as a service. It's a software company, and it's exactly was born out of your question, which is, yep, there was a problem. We figured out a way to solve it. And then we also realized, man, this can be monetized in a way that could help us solve it for other people too. Yeah. Because we work with a lot of warehouses in the space. So for us to do our job, we have to work with other warehouses. And when we're working with those other warehouses, we see the problems that they have, and it's the same problems that we were having. So we knew it was a problem, not just for us, but for the industry as a whole. Just because we're like in the industry, it's that big of a problem. It was pretty obvious, if that makes sense. Yeah. Great. Yeah, LinkedIn would probably be the easiest way. Ben Hagedorn on LinkedIn. In Kansas City, Warehouse Quote would be the company, and that would be the best way to reach out. I always make it a point to connect with people from UMKC, so even if I get random connections from UMKC I might not know, I always want to try to support and help, so. Yeah.
What is, favorite part about what you do?
A favorite part of what I do is watching people accomplish something they like previously didn't think they could. So I'll give you an example. One of our operators at Warehouse Quote was a nanny before joining Warehouse Quote. She took a fair amount of anxiety medicine, and she did not think she was really good at anything. She now manages a team on the operations side, no longer takes any anxiety medication, and recently told me that Warehouse Quote has made her a better person. And that's amazing. I don't think there's ever going to be a time where like that's going to be surpassed as one of my favorite all-time memories. And it happened because it happened because of our culture. It happened because of our respect, and it happened because we were able to push to say, you can do this. And we let her do it, and she proved it to herself that she could. So that would be, that's that kind of stuff. Like that's my favorite thing about what I do. 3 years. Yeah. And we're only a 4-year-old company. So yeah. All right. You have one? Oh, yeah. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you.
appreciated. Fourthly, we have a appreciation gift for you
Oh, thank you.
from the Launchpad Scholars and the Blocks family. We just wanted to thank you so much for your time. We do not take lightly the time that our alumni come back and invest in our students. It is so important. And so thank you so much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
No.
My pleasure was all mine.
No problem. Thank you, guys. Don't forget to check in and make sure you get your credit online. Make sure you check in and get. And again, Ben is available. Reach out to him on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, let us know. Yeah.